Welcome to this episode of the $1 Million Mastermind. I'm Larry Weidel, and before we get started, if you want to know exactly how to win again and again, go to weidelonwinning.com/webinar now to watch something I've put together for you. Now let's get going into this episode of $1 Million Mastermind. I'm here with Kalpesh Patel, and we're fighting our way to covering this subject of how to unravel the complex situations. And, that's one thing that, when you're teaching, people, you get to that point to where they're saying, okay, I get it. Now, how am I going to go about that? And to give them some clues and get them to where they have a sense that this is something they can do. How do you go about getting that in their mind?
Yeah. So I think that this is actually something that I'm realizing I was doing it so subconsciously, I really wasn't giving myself credit for it. And also because of that, I wasn't being very overt in expressing this to my students, but the sheer determination and the sheer joy of solving the problem, I think is a big piece. Another piece is like understanding your role in the overarching thing. Why is it that you have to solve the problem? Oh, because there's no one else to solve this problem. Like I'm it. I'm the last man standing. I am the wall. Whatever that role is, I think it's very important to recognize what that role is that you play, so that when you're getting tired, when you're getting wobbled, when you're dealing with failure number 3 of your, trials, you can pick yourself up and dust yourself off because, well, it doesn't matter the particulars of what my problem solving was this time or how much it failed or whatever else. This is my role, and it's still my role. No one else has come here and said, I'm going to spot you. So I got to keep on trucking here. So I think that's a big piece.
That's the mindset. And the thing is, every winning leader has got to have that attitude. There's no different than like the pregnant mom, 3/4 of the way through the pregnancy cannot say, okay, that does it. I'm not going any further. No, you're in now. You got to hang, you got to find it inside yourself to hang through, because there comes the point that you just can't back out of. But the people that get really clever about finding ways to shirk responsibility when a lot of people are counting on them are the people that never amount to anything, and they never get that chance again. Like the farmer, he plants the crop, it's in there all year. He's fertilizing and, pulling the weeds out and everything. When it comes harvest time, it doesn't matter. You got to get the hay out of the field and the rain's coming. It doesn't matter if he's got a cold, if, his daughter has got a piano recital, the rain's coming, he's tired, he's staying out in the field all night so that hay gets in the barn. It's that type of attitude. Right. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, I that's where the role thing, I feel like the recognizing the role kind of helps people get to the point where they can see whether that's there or whether it's missing. Because, the situation you just described, as you said, my family came from India originally, and especially on my mother's side, an actual farming community. So even though I didn't spend a lot of time there, when I was there, and it was absolutely a farming community. Right. And so one of the things that you learn in a farming community, like the sense that people have when they live off the land, is what we would call in English husbandry.
Right.
Right. It's not just that you own the land. It's not just that you reap from the land. It's not the land is just there to be worked and then kind of like profited off of. You're responsible for this thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's dependent on you. It can be fruitful, but it needs you to fulfill your role of husbandry in order to be fruitful.
And I know, I mean, I'll compliment you. I know that the guy who hired you, he was already an administrator type guy because he was the guy who hired you. And so as you got bigger, more and more clients and this, that, and the other, I'm sure he was diverted in his daily calendar of things to do, but you were still there, hands on. And for 20 years, you became the wall in that clinic. And that, I just think, Kalpesh, you should take some joy or some satisfaction because of knowing that, because, you know, you've left that and now you got your own clinic. But the thing is that you were that wall where people came in, and if they couldn't get results from any other place, they shuttled them over to Kalpesh.
Yep.
And you got, you know, because you had that husbandry type thing, I'm responsible. You somehow took ownership of this whole clinic and whole project and program. You operated your mentality of what you saw your role was not a guy working by the hour working on this thing, but you know, you obviously could have had the cavalier attitude. Don't give me these tough ones. You know, I just want
Right.
right, you know, who needs this hassle, you know?
Right.
You know, let me just,
Right.
you know, out of 10, let me have, you know, 5 easy ones, a couple of tough ones.
Right. Yeah.
Rather
Yeah.
than one
Yeah.
right after another that comes in
Right.
the door as a nightmare you never
Yeah.
heard of, and nobody's ever had this before.
Yeah.
But I do think the results that came from that clinic of people, you know, and the good reputation that rippled out,
Yes.
because you saw yourself in that role, had everything to do with the growth of that clinic and it becoming a magnet over time. But so I wanted to give you credit for that, but you also learned that in London, I think, going through experiences with your family, and your father had a restaurant or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
Let them know about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So my family, my parents both went to London when they were 18 to go to college, and they actually met there. You know, in London, in England has a huge Indian community now, but that's because there's been different influxes. But this was in the late 50s, I think, that when my parents went there, you know, it was a very small community, very small numbers of young Indian people going there. And what ended up happening with my dad is that he just kind of saw how much of a struggle it was to get somewhere professionally in those days for the vast majority of his fellow Indian students. And they would all work part-time while they were in college. You know, they're making money, and they would all live very frugally. So he convinced them all to set money aside. They pulled their money and they started to do some sort of import-export business thing, where they would bring in materials from India, you know, and that business kept growing to the point where Dad eventually just went ahead and moved to London and kept growing this import business. And you know, he was also the kind of guy that kind of, you know, kept his eyes open and looked at where the needs were, and he realized that there was a contingent of very wealthy Indian people coming to London to do business who were all vegetarian, because that's just how we were raised. And so they didn't have anywhere to eat that they could count on getting getting vegetarian food. There weren't Indian restaurants there then in London. And so he opened this little diner that catered to these Indian businessmen, you know, and he just made home cooking, but he knew how to cook. And so he just made, you know, simple stuff, but it was stuff that everybody was familiar with. It's like going, you know, you're imagine, like, you know, traveling in the 70s, being somewhere in France and being able to pop in someplace, just get a burger and fries, right? It was every American's dream, like, oh, thank God, you know.
Yeah, right.
I can have a no-brainer meal, feel like home for a minute, you know. Every day I'll be eating things I can't pronounce, you know, that sort of thing. So, and then that turned into, he realized, oh, well, you know, these people are eating with me, they'd probably like to stay with me. And you saw a hotel for sale, a small little hotel down the road, bought the hotel. Now we had a little restaurant and a hotel. These guys are like, well, we eat with you every day, twice a day anyway. We're just staying in your place. So now he's got these, fairly wealthy businessmen that are traveling from India all the time, staying with him. He just kept building it. My mom then decided to open a little grocery store. There were more and more events happening. And so next thing you know, they were doing catering. Dad realized there was a lot of Indian people that were traveling that would prefer to do business with an Indian travel agent so that they could discuss the minutiae of their travel plans with somebody that's knowledgeable with India. And so he opened a little travel agency, and every time he opened another business, it was in collaboration with somebody else who was an expert.
Yeah.
Right. Dad was good at finding locations, and he was good at making connections with people.
Yeah.
And he could get capital because he already had things going. He already had going concerns that were successful. So when he went to people for capital, he just had to point at the already successful businesses, and they're like, oh, sure, yeah, I'll invest with you as an individual. I don't know about this particular concern, but you as an individual have already shown success in multiple concerns. So you're probably going to pick well, and you're probably going to throw your shoulder behind it, and all of those things, we can count on that, right? So I just grew up in this small business environment day in and day out. My mom would just have me there in the grocery store. I had a job from the minute I could walk, right? There were little old ladies that would come in the store. My mom would, if I was sitting around doing something, she'll get up, go hold the lady's hand and ask her what she wants, and walk her around the store and show her where things are on the shelves.
And
right?
How did you get evolved from that to where you're running his restaurant over there?
Oh, well, I mean, that was all very long story, but during high school, I did work in the restaurant routinely. Like, I'd come home from school, and that was my first thing. I'd come home from school, do a little prep work in the kitchen, then do homework, have a meal, then work the evening shift, waiting tables, talking to customers. And so, of course, all this time I'm watching how business gets done, right? I'm listening to my parents talk to suppliers. I'm listening to my dad, ask questions of customers, and, get people to talk about themselves and tell stories and all of this stuff. Like, I'm watching how all of this stuff gets done. Dad's taking money from people, and it's a big bill, right? And people are forking over a lot of cash. Dad's making jokes. He's making them feel happy while they're handing over money. He's taking a moment, right, to go like, let's not let them get stressed out in this final moment of their being in the restaurant when they're finally forking over a big wad of dough. Let's make them continue to feel happy, make them laugh a little bit, right? Like, and I was like, I'm so all this stuff. And then many years later, it wasn't my plan to run the restaurant, but my mother took ill. She was diagnosed with kidney failure. And she was so committed to the business. She had so much writing on the business, and she was also so committed to the people that worked for her, who were all family men. And the idea of the business dipping in any way and not negatively affecting her staff was just horrific to her. And I was in one of those funny situations where things that I thought were going concerns didn't pan out. And I said, Mom, look, I'm kind of empty-handed right now. Let me just step in and run this for you, because you can't do this right now. And she said, no, I don't want you involved in this business, And I said, so I had to promise her. I said, look, Mom, I promise you I won't stay involved in it more than 5 years. That's all I'll do. I'll do 5 years. I promise. In 5 years, I will convert it so that it runs itself, so you don't have to do it so hands-on, right? She was very mom and pop. You want to do it right, do it yourself. If she came across an error, she wouldn't go lambast somebody. She would just do it herself.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, okay, I'm going to help it. I'm going to help you convert it from that model to something where people have are delegated more responsibility. And when that's done in 5 years, I will wash my hands of this, but it'll be a stable entity that you don't have to put as much effort into. And that's what I did.
And see, the thing is that the reason it worked was, I'd like to point out, I don't know if you've thought about it, you were, in essence, grew up in a business clinic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, very much so.
Where
Yeah.
you saw all the different aspects all at once,
Yeah.
not just learning this and then learning that, but saw how they all evolved together. And of
Yeah.
course, in over time, all kind of different situations come expansion, business is booming, business is flat,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
easy to get the supplies, then you can't find food,
Yeah.
and so you learn how to treat people, you learn all that stuff. But then when the situation came, it was easy for you to take in. But I think the role there, and I think the lesson for people running this, listening, is it wasn't a 5-month plan, a 5-week plan, 5-year plan, and make it automatic where it's not personality that you need to look at your business and say, in X number of years, I want to be able to pull out of this thing. I might not, I might hang in, I might open, I might do anything, but I want to be
Right.
able to exit and pass it on and not have the quality drop, because I don't want to build a personality driven
Exactly. Yeah.
business
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
I want to build a business and really only have a business when it will run without you there. And
Yes.
and that's an extension of identifying, installing the models in the systems, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And
Every
and
person,
there were a lot of very specific steps that had to be taken in order for that to happen. You know, and you know, it's funny. I don't know how much of it was just a function of logic, of just sort of looking at what the problem was and going, well, this is the obvious solution, and how much of it was being around other things. Because I know there are things I did that were relatively innovative. One of the things that I did was during the off season, I made people cross train each other's jobs just a little bit.
yeah,
Right? Not so that they could necessarily gain a particular skill, but that number one goal in my mind, and I didn't say this to them, is to have them walk in each other's shoes for a minute.
right.
Because one of the things I wanted to do away with was the way that they would fuss at each other when things got hairy, when things were really busy and then mistakes got made. They would start fussing at each other, right? And they'd get grumpy with each other. And I wanted to eliminate that. Because in the restaurant business, especially if you're successful, it's going to get really busy a lot. Mistakes are going to happen often. You can't have this be part of the culture that people snipe at each other. Like I wanted to get rid of that. So I thought, if they walk in each other's shoes for a minute, they'll know that, when that other guy is not paying attention to them, it's because he's paying attention to some other thing that's actually important. And now that they've been on the other side of that counter and fussed, they're like, oh, I know what he's looking at. The guy's looking like this. I actually know what the object is he's looking at right now.
Right. And so as you did that, we've talked about that. It just seemed like instinctively you figured out what to do, but you're following a path of logic. What is the obvious thing? And that is really an extension of this thing, how you unravel complex situations, things, because if you're successful, you're going to be faced with things you've never been faced before, pretty much the rest of your life.
Right.
If you do something well, then it grows. And now what are we going to do? And so the deal is, let's just talk about staring. I just want to wrap it up with this. It's like, as you go through life, you go along and then things happen, bumps in the road. And I'm going to say how I remember us talking about it. And you said, like, when the bump in the road happens, it's like instantly a number of options occurs to you, but there'll only be one optimal, one best option.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a way of thinking that you can use in all areas of your life. There's lots of things you can do, but if you think it through, this is the reason not to rush into a burning building. This is a reason not to run up on stage and slap Chris Rock. It's like, something happened, the guy, I think he insulted my life. Actually, it was a very mild joke. But anyway, the fire went off in his head. Will's head is like, one option, go up on stage and slap him and humiliate myself in front of the world. And there were other options, but he didn't give himself time to realize this is not the optimal choice.
Mhm.
Wait, maybe wait till the show's over and then go slap him, if you still want to slap him, but there's always an optimal, always choices, but there's always an optimal choice. And that's why that resonated with me, because I think, going through the process of writing the book at the time. And I was talking about the fact that when you're solving problems or you're dealing with issues, you can always take a step forward, and you can always take a step forward that shifts the odds of success in your favor, where, you still might be behind the 8 ball, you still might be this, but if you evaluate your options for your next step, there will be a step that will help you improve your odds.
Yes.
And there's usually only one of those.
Yeah.
And so talk about how you figured that out and how you look at so you might restate that in your own words.
I think one of the things is that I have the habit of visualizing something before I do it.
Yeah.
And I had realized that that often would get looked down upon by certain people.
Really?
As it's not passionate enough. It's like you don't trust yourself. You should just flow into things, et cetera, et cetera. And I understood it at the time, because from a young person's perspective, particularly, it seems hesitant. And by definition, it seems without courage.
No, that's an idiot who told you that and would show you.
Well, a young person, let's just say it's a young person, right?
As a young person, and the people that are telling young people that need to be, removed from authority positions, because
Sure.
If the thing is, the smart thing to do is,
Right.
They don't just say, I want to build a 100-story building, get the contractors, dig a hole, no, anything, if you're going to build a bird house, I guess, sure, just go do it. Be passionate. But if you're going to
margin for error.
Yeah. If you're going to build, birds will put up with anything, but
wide margin there.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you're going to do anything substantial, it requires thought.
Yes.
And because you have to be specific to be dynamic. You can't just do 1,000 things. You got to
Exactly. You got to be specific to be dynamic. I love that. That's great. Yeah. And so exactly. So I think what worked out in my favor is that I already had this work habit of visualizing things.
Right.
And so that gave me the opportunity to actually see how it's all going to play out. Even if my visualization is my imagination, it's not necessarily always accurate, but it would give me a chance to actually go, well, how would this play out? And make adjustments before I did the final thing, right. And I was gratified that, I didn't grow up playing golf, and I didn't grow up knowing anyone played golf. So, the first time that I watched a golfer do 3 practice swings before they stepped up to the ball, I said, aha, look.
Yeah, right.
Look at that. The one for whom the margin of error is meeny, no margin of error. That person is like, no, I better work out my angles in there hoo-ha before I step up to the ball, because I can't just be doing any old thing here. So I realized later, oh, I'm an engineer. That's what I am. And people ask me, well, what do you do, Kalpesh? So what's so special about your approach to dealing with people's bodies? It's that I take an engineer's approach. Usually the people who come to me, their margin of error has already been exceeded, hasn't it? They're in the red already,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't even have anything much to play with in that sense, right? So I better think through what I'm going to do before I do it.
Yeah.
And the more they're screaming for me to hurry up and do something, the slower I go.
Yeah. Yeah. Smart, because, you know, one of the greatest women's pro golfers of all time, Anna Sorensen, said she, every shot, you know, she was like a metronome, you know, consistent. And she would go stand behind the ball. She called it the thinking box. Stand behind the ball about, you know, 4, 5, 6, 8 feet, and look at the ball and where she wanted to go, and then think about the visualization of this, that, and the other, and the shot she wanted to hit. Then she'd walk up and she said, now I'm not thinking anymore. I'm in the hitting box. And she had her warm-up routine that she repeated every time based off what shot and where she wanted to go, you know. And she'd have her practice swings. She'd go through a routine and she'd swing. But it's consistency and comes from having that type approach. You know, it's like plan your week, you plan your month, you plan, you know, you're always thinking about. And again, one thing you said there, making the adjustments, because the clearer you are about what you want, the quicker you can realize if it's happening or not.
Yes. Yeah. And emotionally, you've got to be ready to accept the sight of failure when it pops up, even in your imagination. If you're failing, don't start telling yourself little stories about it. Just accept that. Yep. Okay. Right. That looks like an F to me. All right. Well, I guess back to the drawing board. And I literally say that out loud in clinic to patients. I'll be like, well, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to try to save my ego and lie about something being successful, or try to make something appear successful if it wasn't. You know, I think owning up, again, it kind of comes back to that whole husbandry thing, you know. It's like, are you responsible? And if you're responsible, act responsibly.
Right. Well, thanks so much. This has been every bit as much fun as I thought it would be. And looking forward to you having incredible success with your new clinic.
Thank you.
Looking forward for me to get in the car and come see you sometime this spring.
All right, super.
Thanks so much, Kalpesh.
Pleasure.
Is there a last word that you'd like to leave people with about navigating successfully through life and keeping their head on their shoulders?
You know, I mean, I got to go with my thing, which is think, and enjoy it. Enjoy your thinking.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Appreciate
All right,
it.
Larry.
If you enjoyed what you've heard and are dead serious about finding out for yourself exactly how this works in the real world, I've taken the most valuable business lessons I've learned over 40 years and put them into something for you to watch. Go to whiteelementing.com/webinar now in order to move up as fast as possible. I'm Larry Weidel, and I run the $1 Million Mastermind. Go, go, go.